The Holden Commodore made an appearance and gave buyers a choice between a four-door sedan or a wagon, while offering buyers a range of engines to choose from. The Commodore was essentially developed in response to the 1973 oil crisis and the need for more fuel-efficient cars during the time. It was popular in its region, just like a contemporary Ford Falcon. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at the early versions of the Holden Commodore and how it was extremely popular amongst car buyers. So grab a C4 energy drink, kick back, and let's get down to the nitty-gritty. By the late 1970s, American auto manufacturers were downsizing their cars to smaller, more efficient models. In the American automobile industry, downsizing was a direct response to the 1973 oil crisis, which resulted in the enactment of corporate average fuel economy standards in 1975. By the beginning of the new decade, 1980, each auto manufacturer producing cars for sale in the United States were required to produce an average of 20 miles per gallon across their entire product line. So, as full-size cars reached the final year of their product cycle, the Ford Motor Company, Chrysler Corporation, and General Motors were planning on replacing those outgoing cars with newer, smaller full-size models with improved fuel efficiency. And despite being downsized, these newer models will have interior dimensions as closely as possible to the outgoing ones. In 1977, General Motors became the first American manufacturer to roll out downsized versions of its full-size cars. While General Motors was busy downsizing cars throughout its various brands in the United States, there was also some downsizing taking place in other parts of the globe. Holden was once known as General Motors Holden and was a subsidiary of the United States-based General Motors. Holden, an Australian automobile manufacturer, imported, exported, and sold cars under its own brand in Australia. The HZ Holden sedan and wagons utilized a platform that dated back to the early 1970s. These full-size cars would soon be discontinued and replaced by a contemporary Euro-like sedan and wagon that would have smaller dimensions. Downsizing was indeed a risky move, especially since customers in this particular region favored large, full-figured sedans. However, the engineering efforts would eventually prove successful. General Motors Holden decided to invest $110 million in developing the new, smaller line of family cars for the Australian market. Enter the first-generation Holden Commodore. The body was based on a particular Opel model, while the front was from a different Opel model, and was grafted on in order to accommodate the larger Holden engines. The Commodore had smaller dimensions than the previous full-size Holden HZ, and was also a response to the oil crisis and the need to produce more fuel-efficient cars. The body was significantly strengthened to withstand the harsh terrain, roads, and conditions of the Australian environment. The original Commodore offered a sedan in 3 levels of trim: Commodore, Commodore SL, and Commodore SLE. It was joined 8 months later by Base and SL Wagon. The overhead valve engines were largely carried over from the full-size HZ, and the engine blocks on these motors were painted red and were simply referred to as the red motors. The base model came standard with a 2.8 inline 6. Car shoppers could upgrade their base Commodore with the 4.2 V8 or 3.3 inline 6. The 3.3 was actually standard equipment in the mid-level SL trim. The top trim SLE was a 4.2 or 5-liter V8 only. This model served as the first iteration of the first-generation Holden Commodore. With production of the VB beginning in fall of 1978, it will only remain in production for 17 months until the next iteration made its appearance. 1980. In February of this year, the VC Commodore made its appearance. The new VC served as the second iteration of the first-generation Holden Commodore. Overall, the visual appearance of the revised car was minimal in comparison to the previous VB. Up front, there was now a distinctive egg crate grille and several minor cosmetic changes. The suspension was revised, yielding better handling and ride quality. new options were available too, such as cruise control. And while all of this might sound minor, the real changes happened under the hood. The red engines were now replaced by blue engines. As we mentioned earlier in this video, the engine block on these motors were previously painted a red color and were commonly referred to as the red motor. For this VC iteration, the engine blocks were painted blue. The blue units had the same amount of displacement as the red ones. However, the blue units were designed to be more efficient. Enhanced efficiency was definitely welcome and would help towards improving fuel economy due to the rising price of oil at the time. There were all new 12-port cylinder heads, redesigned inlet and exhaust manifolds, and a 2-barrel carburetor for inline-6 engines. The 4.2 and 5-liter V8s were also revised, but not as heavily revised as the other engines. The 4.2-liter got a 4-barrel carburetor, but was dropped from the Commodore SLE's standard equipment list. Overall, the new blue engines deliver better power, efficiency, and drivability, and the enhancements improved power by 25% and fuel efficiency by 15%. In conjunction with the revised engines, a 1.9-liter inline-4 later joined the engine lineup. This 4-cylinder mill was dubbed the Starfire and was virtually nothing more than one of the 2.8-liter blue inline-6 engines with 2 of the cylinders removed. Being a crudely cut-down version of the long-running Holden 6-cylinder engine, the Starfire inline-4 wheezed out a miserable 78 horsepower. This engine found its way into the Commodore for several reasons. One reason being in response to increasing pressure from the 1979 energy crisis. Another reason was to fill in for the Sunbird, which went out of production in September 1980. Needless to say, the Starfire engine was not well received. Customers griped about its lack of power. To make matters worse, with its poor power-to-weight ratio, the engine needed to be pushed hard for highway passing and simple day-to-day acceleration. Ultimately, this negated whatever fuel-saving benefits the engine provided. There was also a new trim level added to the lineup, the L. Earlier in this video, we mentioned how the original VB Commodore offered a sedan in 3 trim levels: Commodore, Commodore SL, and Commodore SLE. Well, the new L model joined the fray to replace that base Commodore. The mid-level SL and flagship SLE from the original VB continued on. And as far as transmission choices, there was a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic. In November 1980, there was a new limited edition model based on the Commodore SLE, which was developed with race driver Peter Brock. The new model was a HDT Commodore. There was a unique body kit and a tuned suspension. Power was supplied via an HDT-tuned 5-liter V8, cranking out 210 horsepower. The stock power plant was modded to create those extra ponies. There were larger valves, a reshaped combustion chamber, and a larger radiator. On the outside, there was a heavy-duty limited slip differential. These, after all, were limited edition vehicles, with just 500 examples being produced. And as far as exterior color choices, there was Palette White, Firethorn Red, or Tuxedo Black. Today, the Holden brand is no more, but the HDT Commodore was basically the ancestor of the more modern HSVs. After being launched in early 1980, the VC series would be replaced by the VH series in October 1981. All in all, the VC series improved significantly over the VB Commodore and maintained the title of Australia's best-selling car. As always, thanks for coming out to the show, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until next time, this is your host Rob, and thanks for tuning in to Antique Tags.